On June 12, 1929, Anneliese Marie Frank was born in Frankfurt, Germany. She had an older sister of the name Margot. She lived with her parents, Edith Frank and Otto Frank. The Franks family was a typical upper-middle-class German Jewish family in a religiously diverse neighborhood near the outskirts of Frankfurt. Anne Frank was raised in a mixed community of Jewish and non-Jewish people who were various religions. As the anti-Jewish National Socialist Party, led by Hitler, started to come to power by March of 1933, Oda decided it was better for the family if they moved out of Germany. Edith, along with Anne and Margot, moved to live with their grandmother, Rosa Hollander, for safety. While moving, Otto remained in Frankfurt because of his job. Later on, he received an offer to start a company in Amsterdam. Otto accepted and moved to Amsterdam. The Frank family were among about 300,000 Jew families that fled to Germany between 1933 and 1939.
February 1934, Edith moved Margot and Anne to Amsterdam. Margaret was enrolled into a public school, while Anne in 1934 was admitted to a Montessori school. The difference between the sisters were well shown. Margot showed manners reserved and studious, while Anne showed characteristics of outspoken, energetic, and extrovert person.
As Hitler became power of the NSDAP, or the Nazi Party, he idealed that Germany needed a better leader. The Nazi Party, with Hitler as their leader, fled the streets to the capital, where Paul von Hindenburg was in power. As Hindenburg was afraid of the results, he stepped down from power, and on January 30th, 1933, Hitler was Chancellor of Germany. Almost immediately, the plans of the Nazis began to start.
The Nazi Party began to get rid of all political oppositions and consolidate power. Hindenburg died on August 2, 1934. Hitler was appointed dictator of Germany. He said speeches throughout Germany of Jews being the main reason of the Depression. The Jews were considered undesirable and were persecuted and murdered. As Hitler planned to kill all the Jews, he started with simple steps, as separating Jews and Germans from each other, forcing them to wear the Star of David of all times on their clothes, and they even had a curfew. Jews were even banned from certain entertainment areas such as movies. Schools soon became segregated, and Jews were forced to travel.
In May 1940, when Nazi Germany took over the Netherlands, Anne's life drastically changed. In October 1940, Nazis imposed the anti-Jewish measures on the Netherlands. They had to wear the yellow stars, and Anne and her sister were forced into a segregated Jewish school. As Jews were forbidden to own any businesses, Odo managed to keep ownership of his business by signing ownership to some people who were his Christian associates. Odo managed to keep his distance and play a role in the company.
On July 5, 1942, Margot received an unofficial summons to report to a Nazi work camp in Germany. A day later, on July 6, the Franks family packed as much as they can, went in all their clothes, and proceeded into Ott's workplace, and stayed in the secret annex, where they stayed quiet for 2 years. Otto spent months before the move preparing to move his family into hiding. Throughout the month, he proceeded to bring materials and required living arrangements as blankets and bedding and books, and working out everything with Miep. The story that the Franks used was that they fled to Switzerland to escape the Nazi groups. They only took what they could carry and left their house like they were in a hurry, and left a note hidden for someone to come into the house and search for them, that they would find the note. A week later, Hermann van Pels, with his wife Auguste and their son Peter, moved into the annex. In November 1942, Fritz Pfeffer, a dentist, joined the Franks and the van Pels in the annex.
The conditions in the house were poor, for medication was limited, Once sick, the families would have to find a way to keep fevers down and be quiet so no one would notice. Because of economic problems, the families mostly ate cheap bulk foods such as potatoes, green beans, and spinach, but on some occasions they were greeted with sweets from meat. Sometimes the limitation was bad to the point where they would have to eat rotten food. Another problem was the girls kept on growing and their clothes were getting.
On August 4th, 1944, someone anonymous betrayed the Franks and the Van Pels family. They were arrested and then later deported to the Western concentration camp. They all were then shoved on a railroad to Auschwitz. After long months of hard labor, Anne and Margot were again transferred during the winter to the Berlin-Belsen concentration camp in Germany. Frank fell ill and died at Auschwitz shortly after the transfer of her daughters, and died on January 6, 1945. As Berlin-Belsen was harsh and had a food scarce, it had awful sanitation and disease. Anne and her sister both came down with a disease called typhus and died within days of each other in the spring of March of 1945. Otto Frank was the only survivor of the Frank family. When returning to Amsterdam on July 18, 1945, he met two sisters who had been with Anne and Margot, and they told Otto of their deaths. Otto lived till August 19, 1980, in Switzerland, where he spent his days talking about the horrors of the Holocaust and spreading word of his daughter's diary. Peter gets put into a daily death march in Auschwitz around January 1945, where he walks to another concentration camp farther west. Later January, he is registered at Martharis concentration camp in Austria. Between April and May 1945, Peter dies in Maastricht at the age 19. Augusta Van Pelt was sent first to Berlin-Belsen concentration camp, and she died in April at Theresienstadt. Hermann Van Pelt was first sent to Auschwitz concentration camp. Hermann survives the first selection of the execution camp, but weeks later, on September 6, 1944, he was sent to the gas chamber.
While Anne Frank was in hiding, she had a diary that she called Kitty. Anne received it on her 12th birthday. In this diary, she mostly wrote inspirational quotes, her favorite actors, and how she was feeling. She also talked about her dreams and what she wanted to be. This document is important because it helped her leave a legacy and helped us understand what was happening at that time in history. She was a role model because she always was positive and looked on the bright side of things. She showed a deeper meaning of the little things in life. Some famous quotes by her are, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." "I don't want to live in vain like most people. I want to be useful or bring enjoyment to all people, even those I never met. I want to go on living even after my death." I think a lot, but I don't say much.